way way, way way, way I am here in Kansas, and there's a long and lengthy story to that. But before I get into it too much, this here is me as a baby in my OU sweatsuit. And I'm with my papa, that's Leo Roberts, and he's here with us today. It's his birthday. And also, I told him it was fine if he did not want to come because OU Texas is playing right now. And he needed a seat, right, Sarah? Apparently he needed to be here. So his family is the family that I'm speaking a lot about today. The reason being, I am a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, and that is through his lineage that I am still a citizen of a sovereign nation that is on these lands, separate from the U.S. And it's a complicated story. And he was like, please don't get political, and I won't be partisan with U.S. politics, but a lot of things that I'm going to talk about have to do with policy, and there's no real way around the history of policy. Things happen because of policy. So anyway, I'm going to start with just asking, just welcoming the ancestors that want to be here today to be here. And I will give you just a moment to think for yourself about the ancestors that have brought you here today and the people that affected you in your coming up. And maybe they're from here, maybe they're not, but I believe that they want to be with us. So I do want to welcome them here today. And to start by introducing myself with our traditional protocol introduction. Amon Dejnakas, Bowe-Wadami Anishinaabe Kwendao, Shishibeni and Bendagwis, Oklahoma and Dochbia, Mina Kansas Mshkode, Dera, Jigwe Mina Mashike Giendo Demig. So an introduction for us is more than just saying, hey, this is my name, how are you? It's really about situating oneself in relationship to a lot of different things. When I say Amon Dejnakas, that is my name, the B, that's my name. That's not just a name, that's not just what you call me, it is my job. I'm a cross-pollinator. And also, on the day that I was named, I was told by our friend Mindy Graham, who isn't here, but has sent a message and saying she's with us in spirit today. But, you know, she talked about how in the Celtic tradition, that is one that goes between the worlds. And I also carry that job, I feel, with me as well. I am Bowe-Wadami is the way that we say Potawatomi. Bodwe is a word that talks about the fire. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But the Potawatomi are the keepers of the fire. And in the Three Fires Confederacy, that is our relationship, our job to our brothers, the Odawa and the Ojibwe. Anishinaabe is that overarching word that means a being that travels through space and time. That's person in Potawatomi. And then Kwe is our word for life giver, for a womb haver. And then Dao is just the word that means that is what I'm being right now. Shishibeni and Bendagwis. Shishibeni means the duck people. The Citizen Potawatomi Band were called the Ducks, and there's a couple of different excuses for that. One is that we were water people and canoe people in the Great Lakes. The way to get around is to get in your boat and go. Another reason or potential explanation for that is that as the Jesuits were converting everyone, they tied a little red handkerchief around their necks so that the next Jesuit who came around didn't have to mess with the ones that had done been converted. So that's an interesting story as well. I just want to say hi to my CP and cousin too. Glad you're here. Bonjour. And then Indibidagwis means that's where I belong. That's where I belong to. Oklahoma and Dolchbia, that means Dolchbia or Dunjaba. That means that's where my bones came from. My bones were made in Oklahoma. That's where my body was built. And then Kansas and Mshkode. Mshkode is our word for prairie. If you notice, Mshkode and Bodway maybe have a little bit of similarity. Mshkode means the place that is burned. So that's the Potawatomi word for the prairie, the place that is burned. And then when I say Kanza Mina Osage Akitan data, what I'm saying is I live around Kanza and Osage land. So that's my way to acknowledge that this was not Potawatomi homelands initially. We came from far away, and we'll get into that. Jigwe, Mina, Mashike, Gi, and Dodemic. Those are my clans, my turtle clan, and then my adopted Thunderbird clan from the Wamego side. As I said, we came from one large group of Algonquin-speaking people known as the Anishinaabe. Potawatomi were included in that, along with the Odawa and Ojibwe, the Three Fires Confederacy or Three Fires Council. And this is some drawings by Jennifer Randall that are in a display down in our Heritage Center in Shawnee, Oklahoma, where our current land base is. It's not a reservation, it's more of a jurisdiction, because we left a reservation in Kansas to go to Oklahoma, and we'll get a little more into that too. The telling of the story is circular, so please try to go in the circle with me, because it's not really linear. Things keep coming back and coming around. These are the 7 fires symbolized by our animal relatives. And so I just kind of wanted to share this because it talks about the different times that the Anishinaabe have lived through as prophesied by some prophets when we were way out on the eastern seaboard. So the very first prophet said that there would be a time when they would have to move west. And so the first fire was a time of traveling from one turtle island to another. And so that's why it's symbolized by a turtle, and that was moving from the eastern seaboard into the Great Lakes. And then while traveling west, there were some stops along the way. There was a boy who was born that would redirect them on their path to movement. And that's what the otters symbolize, is the playfulness of childhood and what we can learn from the children. They are using the pike in this third fire because the wild rice beds became our home. That's where we were fed in the Great Lakes, where the wild rice grows, the food grows on water. And then we get to the fourth fire, where the rattlesnake is what they choose to symbolize this. And I know people have split feelings about rattlesnakes and about snakes in general. And this is the time when we would be confronted with the pale race. And there would be 2 different ways that this could go. And if these new people came with brotherhood, then new knowledge would be shared, and things could be really, really good. Things could grow and become good for all people. But if they came with greed and the need to take from the earth, then that could go a different way. And it said in that time, you shall recognize the face of death if the rivers are poisoned and the fish are unfit to eat. So unfortunately, we see the way that the path did go, because that's where we are today. And then the 5th prophet told a time of hardship, loss of old teachings, abandonment of traditions, acceptance of false truths that cause long-term consequences. And those are still evident today. And that's represented by the bear because as a clan animal, they're protective. And so that's what we're asking about to represent the sacrifices that were made by Potawatomi people to maintain what little that we did have left from those ancestors. And then the 6th fire, was a time of great harm with residential schools and things like that, causing the near extinction of Anishinaabe culture. And so in the Potawatomi oral tradition of the flood, a muskrat, a single muskrat, a pitiful little animal, was the one to go down and get the earth and bring it back to the turtle's back. And so we're using that muskrat in this position to talk about those elders who are weeping for the fact that we're losing traditions and the children who were taken away to boarding schools. And then the seventh fire. The seventh fire prophet told of a generation when the language and the culture and the teachings will be revitalized and that culture could come back. And so we are believing that we are in that time of the seventh fire. We don't have an alternative. You know, we have to believe that, because otherwise there isn't anything left of what our ancestors worked so hard to leave for us. So we talk about that a lot, that we are in the seventh fire. In more recent history, I wanted to talk about one of my most mesmerizing ancestors. This is John Baptiste Beaubien. Are you Beaubien? No. Related to many of their families in the Potawatomi, in the Citizen Potawatomi group. He was a fur trader. He was a justice of the peace. He owned land. He owned the land that Fort Dearborn was built upon in Chicago. He was a Cook County militia major general. He founded a school, the first family school. Legend does have it that he brought in Chicago's first piano. So quite a storied fellow and a very successful businessman, and very a capitalist. You know, he was a hard worker, and was not. When you think of Native peoples that got removed from places, this is probably not who you might be thinking of. So that's why I like to share this picture, because he was a distinguished man and a founder of the city. And so I'd like to put his story out front, because this preceded what's known as the Potawatomi Trail of Death. And I think, you know, when we think about the Potawatomi Trail of Death, when we've heard about the Potawatomi Trail of Death, we might be thinking about men and women wearing buckskin without proper shoes, and who didn't know how to use the land correctly, or who didn't know how to be civilized people. But these were very civilized people that ended up being removed from their lands and taken on that trail of death. It was a 660-mile trek for which the Potawatomi were not prepared. And many people did die, which is why it is so named. There were 3 decades that the Potawatomi, the Citizen Band Potawatomi, spent in Kansas. So many more stretching out before and after. When you talk about Mission Band, or the Prairie Band, which is still here today. The Prairie Band did things a little differently. They did come here before a lot of our families came, and they made themselves friends with the Kaw, and really adopted a lot of the Plains traditions. For some reason, the Citizen Band were not as intermarried, but did intermarry a lot with the Kongsa people. And this is an image from 1877 of a family home, a family farm. But it was hard to come here to the Plains, coming away from the Great Lakes, where the food sources are majorly different. In the Great Lakes, as I said, we were on water a lot. The wild rice is known as a first food and a last food. So it's the first food that a baby can eat and digest, because it can be cooked down and become really soft and easy to eat. And then as elders get older and unable to eat, and they come to the other side and ready to go out that western door, they also need that wild rice. And in many traditional families up in the Great Lakes, wild rice is still a staple, even though it is endangered, as being stewarded back into many of the waterways. to maintain that population, and it still feeds Anishinaabe people today. I was up in Minnesota about a month ago, and I went into a hotel room that I was there for anyway, they were trying to wine and dine us a little bit. I had a gift basket in my room. And in the gift basket was a bag of wild rice. And this wild rice had been harvested by a native group. And when we came back down for dinner together, I said, "Did you guys see that Monoman in our room?" And of course, they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Well, Monoman, it's the good berry. It's the wild rice. And that came from, that was hand harvested." And they said, "Well, that's just a Minnesota thing." And I said, "Well, we don't have time for me to tell you this story. But there's so much more to it's just a Minnesota thing or a Michigan thing. It is a really, it was a part of our story as far as, where we were to settle, where we were to end up and live. And leaving that wild rice behind and coming to a place where that didn't grow. I just can't imagine leaving behind the maple trees, maple syrup being such an important part of our stories, and such an important part of our calories in the wintertime. The maple tree, gives its sap in the wintertime. That sap starts flowing in January and February. So at a time when there's not a lot of other, maybe your squash is running out, you need that. You need that sugar. You need those calories to keep going through the winter. The birch trees were an important part of this as well. The birch trees, if you have birch, you're rich. You have food. You can build a house out of a birch tree. You can build a canoe out of a birch tree. There's so many medicinal properties to birch trees. So there's so many things that you can do with a birch tree. You can live in a birch forest. And there were no birch trees when we came here. Interestingly, the word pecan does come from the Potawatomi word pecan. And it just means nut. And that's a thing that was found by them when they came here. And it's like, what are these things? Well, I guess it's just a nut. And that's where the word, I don't know what they were called by the Osage, and I'd like to know. That's something that's a new project for me, is getting to know the names. What do the Osage and Consett people call these things? So yes, it was probably very difficult to be here and to find new ways to live. My family did operate ferries in Kansas and ice houses and things like that. So they were still tradesmen. They were still industrious. They still, earned honest livings. And yet still, the way had to be made for the railroad. So this is a photograph of my family in Silver Lake, Kansas. This right here is my great grandma on the second from my left, your left, yeah. This is the OG and Bobian families, 1890-ish. That's, like I said, Tina. They were active in politics in Chicago and also in Topeka, and they frequently negotiated between the U.S. and the Potawatomi governments. They worked for the American Fur Trading Company up north and then brought some of that trade down south as well, establishing Silver Lake. When they arrived in 1847, the ferries were over the Kansas and Rock Rivers. So lots and lots happened in those 3 generations that they lived here. Lots of building, lots of industry. Robert Allen, OG, who's one of those fellows back there, was a friend of U.S. Vice President Charles Curtis. And so that was part of his business and dealings in Topeka. He cut timber. He built the first producing oil well drilled once they went to Potawatomi County, Oklahoma. He was apparently sometimes an obstinate man. And so that tells me where my family gets it, right? But they were an Americanized family and yet unable to keep their land in Kansas. So a group known as the Mission Band, known for their conversion to Christianity, they were removed to Maud, Oklahoma, where they accepted allotments and U.S. citizenship in return for this land that they held in common at Silver Lake. So the difference between having a reservation or having land held in common and having allotments is that in Kansas and Silver Lake, there was a big group, and basically we were able to, or a big area of land that we were able to kind of manage ourselves and distribute, whatever was needed to each person. And the way that the U.S. government got us to move to Oklahoma was by offering U.S. citizenship, which we did not have up until that point. And then also by privatizing the land. So making each person have their own bit of land. And what that served to do really was eliminate tribal lands. Not completely, but in Oklahoma now, there are very patchy patchwork ownerships of those allotments, because what would happen is, some people took that deal to get that private land in Oklahoma and hated it, and then they just moved back to Kansas. Well, in a generation or two, you're going to sell that land. You don't want it anymore. So that's kind of what happened as they moved down. And this is family in Oklahoma, and I texted my dad this morning to make sure, because I couldn't remember, but I believe that tallest girl in the middle is my grandma Edith. And that's us with her. I just think these pictures are fascinating because that looks so long ago, but here we are. These are my cousins. These are my brothers and sisters. We were texting last night on and on talking about the land that we have in Oklahoma that kind of came to us in a whole different story from the Cherokee side. Because my grandmother, Papa's wife, Nana Mary Roberts, she was Cherokee, and there were some shady dealings and happenings that caused them to lose their land down there too. And her father did what he wanted to do, which was work until he had the money to buy land right next door to the land that was taken from him in Oklahoma. And we still have that land today. And so that land is held in common by us. And what we are deciding to do is to try to use it, to try to make the best of it. And, kind of what we're up against is some generations of having lost the path and not really knowing, how to treat the land. And not really understanding that native plants are best for the land. And that cross timbers down there, it wants to be a wooded oak forest, and it's beautiful that way. So we are in talks about how are we going to continue these next generations. How are we going to make sure that this land is preserved and able to be used, not just by us to make money, which would be nice, and we do talk about that. We want to throw a music festival all of a sudden. We talked about last night. We've already got plans and a budget. But how do we treat the land well? So we struggle with these questions because there's no one right answer. My personal feeling is that I want to be a good ancestor and a good descendant. I want to make my ancestors proud. And I also want to be a good ancestor to those who are going to come after me. This is at a gourd dance in Shawnee, Oklahoma. That's my youngest. Her little, what is the word? Pernicious face? Is that a good word? I can't think of the word I want to say. But how do we keep going with the teachings of living in a good way? Manoba Matsuan is what we say. How do we keep living in a good way even when we are sort of in this in-between space where things are not looking so good for the earth? For me personally, moving to Kansas was a huge deal. Moving back to Kansas from Oklahoma, that happened about 2005. And as I said before, Scott Dawson and I were married for 13 years, and I got the privilege and the joy of living in rural Chase County. Living in the Flint Hills is like the most beautiful thing that you can do. I felt silly adding this photo to the slideshow because, here we are, right? But it is a beautiful space that allowed me to calm down a little bit and breathe. I had been working in Oklahoma City in a situation that was really unhealthy for a software company, and I was sick all the time. Carly was always in daycare. I made like tons of money in a year, and at the end of it, I didn't have any money because my lifestyle required me to spend it as soon as I got it. I wasn't cooking for myself. I wasn't caring for my own child. I was spending so much money just to be able to make the money. And I really wanted out of that rat race. I really wanted out of that trap. And I tell you what, having to sit at that train stop in Strong City will change your perspective real quick. You don't have anywhere to be. It's fine. They will wait for you. So this place really fostered a big change for me, and in being able to change my perspective and to get a little quieter and to notice what was around me a little bit more. I learned how to forage things that I didn't know were even foods. And I gardened and even learned about ranching some, just a little bit. I got to help deliver a baby sheep one time out in the Flint Hills north of Emporia one time. That was a lot of fun, wasn't it? I also really got into this native foods movement, which is like just an incredible thing that anyone can research and get into. This is a spread from the Taos Pueblo when we went there in October of, I want to say 2018 or 19. But every bit of these foods had been gathered from like a 1 mile radius from where we were in that moment. They also have a bison ranch and had slaughtered bison for us to eat there. And this experience and others like it really helped me to understand that food is important, that food is medicine, and it really does change the way you're feeling on a daily basis. And being able to go outside and just eat anything that I picked or took from the ground or off a tree made a big difference in my outlook for the rest of the day. Being able to go out, and even if it's a little bit of sour wood sorrel or a bitter dandelion green, I made it a habit to go out and see what was around me and eat it. Put it in my mouth and make it a part of me. And just that perspective of, I mean, oneness is eating something, right? Becoming one with nature. I am nature. I just ate nature, and here I am. This is Kaya Deer and Water. He's a dear friend of mine, and someone who I credit with a lot of the knowledge that I've been able to get, and his passion is just contagious. And so I credit him with a lot of my passion for native foods, for wild plants. Some of you will recognize this beautiful person here. This is Robin Wall Kimmerer. And now I'm kind of going in a lineage. Kaya has taught me, and this is Kaya's teacher. So I wanted to say something that's a quote from her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, that we'll sing about later. But this is kind of the perspective change that I think that not just people in the Flint Hills, but the whole world really needs to remember. And before I say this, I want to remind each and every one of you that Native Americans are not the only people with Indigenous ancestors. In fact, every single one of you has Indigenous ancestors. Every single one of you has ancestors who lived on the land, who lived with the land, who probably, had very similar beliefs to Native Americans. It's really striking when you go around the world and you see cultures who are still living this way today, how many similarities there are, because I think the land is the teacher in this scenario. What Robin says in Breeding Sweetgrass is, in the Western tradition, there is a recognized hierarchy of beings with, of course, the human being on top. The pinnacle of evolution, the darling of creation, and the plants are somehow at the bottom. But in native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live and thus have the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have and have had time to figure things out. And so that's what we need to do. We got to figure things out. And I think each and every one of us has that opportunity. And we don't have to have any kind of special teaching. I'm not selling you a book today. I'm not even selling you a workshop for the low price of $39.99. If I had the organization, I might try, but I don't. Better like next year. But we can all do this. This is something we can all do. We can all go out in what we call shapeshift. We can all go out and take notice, go to a place. If you have anywhere access to any kind of outdoor green spaces that we need to preserve, and sorry, that's a policy thing, but we have to preserve these spaces. We have, for a while, time to go out and to notice who wants to speak to us today, who wants to show us what they're doing to adapt to the changing conditions of the world today. I live in the suburbs now, and it's hard. It's harder for me to go out and do that, and I miss it. I really do. So this is not a sermon, except to myself. Like, I do miss this. I miss being able to go out to what's sometimes called a sit spot for a certain amount of time every single day, just to notice, because your mind does change. You know, the input of the dappling shadow of the leaves of a tree. It does something. It does something to our minds and to our brains. But not all of our work is singular. Not all of our work is just stuff that we need to go out and do by ourselves. And that's one thing that I noticed as I was going to these food summits, and as I was going to Potawatomi gatherings and doing things with other people, I noticed this is different. It's different to do it in a community. It's different to do things with a group, in an intergenerational group. And if you have problems with dead animals, you can avert your eyes, because I want to show you something. But there is a big dead animal on this slide. This is a bison that we processed in Michigan at the Food Sovereignty Summit that I went to, and this was in April of 2019. This is just a small snapshot of the work that was being done. And what I'm not showing you is the grandmother who was sitting over here in this chair, and she had her smudge, and she was praying, and she was singing, and we were singing songs together. As people knew them, they would sing with her. And I'm also not showing to you the teenage girls. You know, teenage girls get such a bad rap for not liking gross things. But when I tell you, these teenage girls had the skull. We also processed an elk earlier in the day, and they were working on the skull of this elk because the teeth are used for jewelry. And so, you know, of course, their daddies had said, yes, I'll build you a necklace, but you've got to go get those teeth out of that elk. And they were doing it. They had their picks, and they were digging in through that bone and flesh, and they were pulling those teeth out. And then the young men, the runners, they were running back and forth to where whatever was needed, they would go and get it because they have the energy to do so. One person can't skin a buffalo. One person can't harvest a buffalo. One person can't process a buffalo. And that's true for so many of the things that I and we try to do, whether it's raising a family, managing a piece of land. We need to be doing it in community. Community is hard. People are hard to deal with. You've never experienced that? We nominate John as the leader of this community where no one will ever have any problems. Everything will be fine. He will handle it. It's hard. It's hard to deal with people. We don't agree on everything. We don't even like to look at each other sometimes. But that's how we got along for so long without our TVs and couches. That's how we got along for so long without our personal vehicles. And at some point, as these ways sort of run themselves out, we're going to have to get back to that at some point. We're going to have to do it. And we do it by things like this, by getting together and talking about it. We're going to eat some snacks and play some music later. All very important parts of being in community. And I think one reason why it might be so hard is because we think about working together in maybe a corporate setting. That's terrible, right? And that hierarchy of the people are up here and the plants are on bottom. Didn't we put that over into the corporate world? And we said, somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to be the one calling the shots. And all of you are just going to do as I say. That's not what was happening here. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone has something to give. So this is at Johnson County Community College. As Annie said, I had my daughter home in 2020, and because of connections through the food sovereignty movement, I was able to meet a guy named Ed Smith, and I found out that he was doing hide tanning workshops at Heart of America Indian Center. And then my friend in Council Grove and her husband, they hit a deer. And she called me and she said, I have this deer hide. I don't know what to do with it. I said, I know what to do with it. So I came and picked it up and I drove it up to Johnson County and I gave it to Ed. And while I was talking there to Ed, he said, do you know that there's a scholarship for Native students to go to the Johnson County Community College for Sustainable Agriculture? I said, no, Ed, I did not know that. And I knew right then and there I was going to do it. I didn't know how, but I just knew this is the thing. This is the thing that I can do while I'm not working so much. And, I'm already doing school at home with the kid anyway. So I did enroll, and most of it was online, but we did need to go in and get our farm hours in. And I tell you, working on this farm was so cool. First of all, I was the oldest one, except for the teachers. And so I was the first one to get to drive the tractor. And I just felt like I was learning quicker because my frontal lobe had developed, which was very different from my first college experience, let me tell you. But I had a great time with these folks. And this is what it speaks to what a group of people can do. And yeah, we did get together in the morning, and yes, the ranch manager said, this is what needs to be done. But as we worked together, we decided together what needed to be done. So there you see Lauren telling me what to do because I got my phone out and I'm taking pictures. It was a great experience. And when I got done with that, I wanted to try to find some way to take my background as a musician, an event planner, as a Potawatomi person, and now with a little bit of know-how and a lot more interest in how to pursue sustainable agriculture. And what happened was Goodway Gardens. And what Goodway Gardens is doing is music, land, community, all those things, putting them together. One of the really interesting things, about Potawatomi language is that we don't have a word for music. And there are tons of songs, right? Old songs. There's dance. There's a word for dance, but not for music. So this is really always a puzzle in my mind. But many of the languages don't have a word for art. And I like to think that it was so integrated into daily life that maybe it just wasn't needed to be talked about, because that's the way that you talk, right? When it's time to paddle the canoe, Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. You know, like it just feels good. So let's do it. Goodway Gardens is just kind of, it was built on that concept of how do we come together as people as often as we can and put our lives back together. This is our last concert that we had just a week ago. Pretend Friend was our featured artist. And since our first event in 2023, we've produced 13 events. We've compensated over 40 musicians, local and regional and touring musicians. We are hosted by the generous donation of this little corner of the land that is currently stewarded by the Lyon County Historical Society. And so with this spot of land that was kind of being unused, and me wanting to do a concert series, that just seemed like the right place to be. And so, building that partnership has been, a part of building that community. We also, as Annie has said, been sponsored by Music to Life, which is, she didn't have to say it because I'm going to say that me and Paul are buddies. By Noel Paul Stuckey and his daughter Liz, and I'm just, this picture is just not really capturing or conveying the joy that happens when people can go and be outdoors and you're listening to music and there's the sound of crickets and spring frogs. The boys last weekend were playing this song and it's just got this like do 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 do. And so this beat was going and I heard the spring frog in the tree behind us going creak, 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 creak. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. We did it. Mission accomplished. I'm very proud of what we're doing. And I want it to keep going. We are also Match Day recipient. We're signed up for Match Day. So I just wanted to, I forgot to say anything about that. Annie's a good planner. You remembered to say it. But we had the Emporia Arts Council come out as well. We've been very lucky to have their support come out. And so we're creating things while we're listening to music. We're using our hands and we're using our ears and we're using our bodies to dance and we're using all of our senses to enjoy this beautiful life that we've been given. In closing, I just love this quote: "To love a place is not enough. We must find ways to heal it." I don't have a to-do list for you. I don't have a knowledge even of your yard or your property, but you do. And I think we all can know what to do if we get outside of ourselves for a little while and we can see things from the perspective of our relatives that live among us. Like Robin said, we humans, we're the most pitiful of the species. We have things to learn. We have so much to learn. We have lost a lot of way. We've lost our way in a lot of ways. I want to thank my ancestors and yours who've been here with us. And I want to just close with the song that was written for Mindy Graham, who's not here with us, and she sent me a message earlier, and she said, if you happen to do the song, I just hope that you'll tell the story. So I want to go ahead and tell the story. She was being commissioned as the parish nurse at the church down here in Matfield, and she wanted me to come and sing. And I didn't know what I was going to sing, but I was in the car, and that's the best place to write songs. I don't know if any of you know that, but the song had come to me just as I was driving down the road, and usually I have to like do a recording or something, but it just was there, and it just stayed with me. It just stuck with me. And as I was singing it, I knew that this was her song. And it's called the Sparrow Healing Song. And it is sung 4 times in honor of the 4 directions. And so as we sing it, and I say we because I do welcome you to open your voice and use it, it's good for our bodies to do that. We sing it to the east, and then the south, and then the west, and then the north. And I know that there's so many things in our minds as we think about the world at large and what's going on. So we can use this song as a meditation and a hope for healing for all who need it. And so we'll just take a moment and breathe. Way out, way out, way out, Yahweh, way out, way out, way out, way out, way Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh, Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh. Way Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh, Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh, way Yahweh. Way Yahweh, way